We're rolling already. We're rolling.
Are we rolling?
He's not even.
I'm not cutting the Maverick stuff out.
He's not even done the intro. He's not even done the intro yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about, you said Maverick, Top Gun, right? So my question is this. Top Gun 1 was the OG. Everybody fell in love with, the whole old style of movies. It was a good movie.
Yeah.
Then Top Gun 2 came out. And everybody says, can it be beat? So
I was petrified. I was petrified of watching Maverick.
I was like,
which one?
If it's something
Two.
that, yeah,
Two,
it's
yeah.
something that you can't unsee. Once you've seen it, it's burnt into your imagery for the rest of your life. But the question is, did it live up? I mean, my opinion, and I mean, we've got a professional pilot here. We've got a gunship, gunship helicopter flyer, creator of chaos right here. So you guys can give us the lowdown. But in my opinion, damn, that was a good movie. Like the flight scenes, the cinematography. And I liked how they kind of arced back to the old movie with like pictures on the walls and stuff.
You know,
like it just gets you in the feels, man. And when they play that little intro track, oh, damn, that took me back.
You know why?
I love the old stuff.
Scared at the edge of your seat, and me as well, because we could live the moment. We literally lived the moment, and there was a lot of realistic stuff going on there, and we could identify with it. The flying was just incredible, the way that they shot it, and I mean, I think that is one of the most incredible movies that I've ever seen. It's on par with Gladiator 1. I haven't seen Gladiator 2, but a movie that really makes an impact on you, that you absolutely feel the emotions, you feel the moment.
Gets you in the good stuff.
It gets you in the gut, man. It's incredible stuff.
Well, I was 14 years old when Top Gun 1 came out. And I always wanted to be a military aviator. And I grew up by a base called RAF Valley, which is advanced fast jet flying training on the Hawk, when I was a kid. So I used to go to the weather ship. The weather ship was a jet that got airborne at 8 o'clock every morning.
Not a bad way to wake up, though.
No, right? And the purpose of the weather ship is get airborne and go and check out the weather in the low-flying system across Wales. So the jet would get airborne at a high level. It would drop in Cardiff, which is to the south of Wales, and then it would just make its way up low level through all of the cool valleys and where all the training sorties were going to be for that day. And then the pilot would come down and be like, this area's got weather in it. This area is cool. Like for the first sorties in the morning, you should focus in the north or the south of Wales, or LFA 7 as it was called. So that was the purpose of the weather ship. So I'd wake up to the jet winding up at 8 a.m. every morning. We lived 2 miles away from the base.
The song of my people.
Oh my God, it was literally the sound of freedom to me. So right from like 4 or 5 years old, when I could understand what an airplane was, I'd hear this jet get airborne, and I'd go down, I'd sit by the base, and there was a runway, 1432. The way they line up runways, 14 means 140 degrees, 32 means 320 degrees on the compass, and it's all about lining up a runway to the prevailing winds, because you need to take off into wind, as you'll know, Pete. Because that's the safe way to do business. And I used to wake up to that. And I was 14 years old when Top Gun 1 came out. And I'd already been bitten by the military aviation bug, the fast jet bug.
Right.
It's like, that's what I always wanted to do. Like, when you're growing up, people are like, what do you want to do? And like, it's sort of, you start off like, I'll be a train driver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or an astronaut. That's a good one. Leon, I think you said you wanted to be a bus conductor.
Exactly. The big red, come on, dude, the big red bus.
Right. The power that you have over the tickets. Right.
So you're just driving over everybody.
Fireman.
Yeah.
I think, Pete, you said nurse at some point. You want to be a nurse?
Nurse. Ambulance driver.
There we go, ambulance driver. Sorry. I don't know where my mind was going there. So,
he just wants to work the sirens.
He does, yeah. Well, I just think...
Well, it's a petrol thing.
What's the work with nurses, if I'm honest? Yeah. Who are wonderful, by the way. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, petrol fuels and oxygen.
Which you often find at a hostel.
Or in an ambulance.
But Mikey, you're kind of taking the big question out, like how you actually
so
got into the military and how that
who is
love
Mikey
started.
Kay? Guys, we have Mikey Kay on the program tonight, and just for those who don't know who he is, I always like to say for those guys who don't know who I am, but this is Mikey Kay, an ex-military warfare pilot, weapons expert, current BBC interviewer. No, let me rephrase that. He's running a program on BBC all about war, which we're going to find out about now. And one hell of a guy. I mean, he's... I've tried to keep up with him for the last few days, and it's been a mission of note.
No pun intended.
The fitness level of this guy. I mean, still at the tender age that he is at the moment, his fitness level is incredible. He's still a fighting Rambo comes to mind. But
it's like I messaged him on his birthday,
Yeah.
and I said, "Hey, I hope you're having a lucky day or whatever." I get a message back. Yeah, I just ran up the mountain quickly. I mean, just like casually ran up the mountain.
And listen, he tried to drag me up on the mountain at that time of the morning, and I said, "You got to be joking." What, 5:30 in the morning? You
Done
must
too
be
many
hallucinating.
of those. Done too many of those.
Hallucinating, especially after the night before. I mean, we just run a rally the night before. But anyway, be that as it may be, this is Mikey Kay, and weapons expert of note. So we're going to share a couple of war stories.
Mm-hmm.
We've both been in battle, and me more on olden days, old equipment. Unintentional.
By accident.
I was in, also Special Forces, what we used to call those days. Part of it was SWAT, Southwest Africa Special Command. I was trained as a paratrooper, and then eventually ended up in the SWAT, Southwest Africa Special Command, in the bike squad. So we used to run the bikes, and we used to run the roads and demine all the mines that the guys put in the day before, etc., etc. But we had a couple of interesting battles. But that's nothing compared to the new warfare that's been going on lately. I mean, we're talking about Iraq. We're talking about Afghanistan. We're talking about, what's the third one? Kosovo. And if you think about the battles that are going on at the moment, this is like crazy shit. And I'm so glad that I'm pensioned off as far as that's concerned. and they can't call me up right now,
I'm done, guys.
But having said that, I think I'd give them a go.
For all time's sake, Pete.
But anyway, Mikey, I mean, tell me, who the hell are you?
Well, I mean... we could talk about this for a long time, but I think to condense it,
my introduction will be very short there.
I'm not sure about that, Pete. I'm not sure about that. I'll buy you a bottle of whiskey if it is. Look, always wanted to go fast jet. We were talking about Top Gun earlier. Top Gun kind of always wanted to be a fast jet, but Top Gun then sort of put that into a beautiful 90-minute movie where you're like, I can see myself doing that. And loved it, and applied for a scholarship to the Royal Air Force when I was 15. Got the scholarship, learned how to fly at 17. My first solo. Pete, you know what this is like. When you first go solo, it's a moment, right? When you're
it's a major moment. Major.
The instructor finally goes, "All right, you ready to go and take to the skies by yourself?" You're like, absolutely brilliant, and then you shit yourself. you're like,
what now?
You're like, fuck. You're like, you love the idea.
Yeah.
You woke up in the morning going, I'm going to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And then your instructor gets out and he goes, all right, it's all yours. And you're like,
touching cloth.
now what happens? So anyway, it's at Liverpool Airport, which is now called John Lennon. It was Speak at the time. I'm in a Cessna 152, and I'm 17 years old, just turned. And I'm taxiing down the runway, going down to the threshold, call for departure, Liverpool Tower. This is Cessna 152, ready for departure, VFR South. And all I get from the tower is from ground is Roger, contact tower on 122.25. So Roger that. Tower, this is Cessna 152, ready for departure on runway, whatever it was. And all I got back was standby, red arrows are initials. Now, the red arrows are the UK's Air Force.
Yeah, they're like the Blue Angels, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the US Navy Blue Angels, they're the equivalent of the Patrie de France, which are the French Alpha Jets, or the Italians. Can't remember their name. Their name escapes me. But they're the preeminent air display team, Hawks, all in red. And so I'm lined up on solo on this runway, and I'm been asked to hold, and I look to my left, and initials, fucking sure as eggs were eggs, there were 9 Hawks coming in for the break with white smoke coming out the back.
What?
And they break into the circuit, and I'm watching. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, this is my dream. This is my vision. And talk about manifestation or whatever you want to call it, but like red one, cool. And I'm on tower, right? So you can hear them on frequency.
Yeah.
So it's like red arrows on the brake, red 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just like,
Go.
I don't even think I fucking knew what a hard on was at that point in my life, but I had a hard on looking back on it. At the time, I just thought, the straps are getting quite uncomfortable.
The feeling.
Right. Yeah. So red one comes in, and then like the way that these guys fly, and it's not just the Reds, it's the US Angels, it's everyone. But they're just this. It's so precision, and it's so beautiful to see when you see formation flying, and you see 9 aircraft in close formation breaking into a circuit. It's so precise. It's so practiced. It's so precision. It's like on a Porsche, Pete. You look at an engine. Everything is designed to be that way. Nothing is that way by surprise or by mistake. So these guys all land, and then eventually Tyre goes. Hey, Cessna 152, you're clear lineup. I was just like, long pause. I was
After all that, Jesus.
staring at I just wanted to go back in and speak to the pilots.
Can't I just block this thing up, come back later?
Yeah. I'd done it. I'd already gone and like flown around and come back in my head.
So, well, this is boring. I want to go do that.
Yeah, and I got airborne, and that was my sort of introduction to being in proximity to the military aviation life that I wanted.
And then that transcended obviously to the helicopter side.
Yeah, so started going through flying training and loved every moment. Started off on T-67 Firefly, then we went on to the Tucano.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, best way of describing a Tucano is
Is it
like
a helicopter or a fixed wing?
modern day Spitfire is the best way I'd say. So turboprop. We've spoken in the past.
It's kind of like those, almost like those aerobatic single wings.
Yeah, it's
like a fixed wing.
It kind of looks like a. Does it look like a Spitfire? It's a monoplane, but it can do 300 knots. It's supremely maneuverable. It's got some good power on it. It's got a big engine on it, all the aviation aids, and it's the aircraft that then leads you into the Hawk. So it's called the basic fast flying trainer, and then you go on to the advanced flying trainer, which is the Hawk. And so got onto the Tucano, and then at that point I'm starting to grow. So I'm 6'6" now. And I'm starting to grow, and I'm like, the ejection seat on these things has parameters. And it's not just about your height, it's about the measurement between your buttock and your knee.
Yeah.
It's about the measurement between your buttock and your height and your arm length and everything. And so it started to get tight. And then I went into the Hawk, flew 100 hours in the Hawk, and basically there was a moment where I had to be in the hangar. They had to winch out the ejection seat with me in it to make sure that my knees didn't catch on the coaming. And they did. And I knew at that moment my fast jet career gone.
Sure.
Which was, I was gutted. Absolutely gutted.
I can imagine, because there goes the Top Gun moment.
Right. I am literally flashbacking Top Gun 1 in my head, and I had to go and fly helicopters. And at the time, I didn't want to fly helicopters. I wanted to be flying at Mach 1 plus. I wanted to be in air combat.
Yeah.
I'd been experienced to that when I was flying on the Hawk as a holding steward. I absolutely loved the idea of the aggression that was required to be a fast jet pilot. So ended up having to go fly Gazelle, but realized quite quickly that I had, I was a good fixed wing guy, but helicopters I just had an ability to be able to do it really well, really quickly, reproduce what the instructor said, and get on with it really, really quickly. Now, the bonus about all of this, which I obviously didn't know at the time, was this was around 96, 97. And things were quite quiet. I think the only thing going on then at the moment was, you remember Iraq 1, where Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait. So there was a couple of F-3s, which is the Tornado, which the Brits flew, and they were doing air policing over Iraq to make sure that Iraq couldn't develop Saddam Hussein couldn't develop an air force. So there's that stuff going on. But when it started to get really interesting was in 1998, 99, when Bosnia happened. And then Kosovo happened, and then all of the assault helicopter guys and girls were now starting to get deployed into these countries and get serious experience. And the fast jet guys were getting 10 hours a week. They were doing a little bit of policing, but there wasn't major operations going on. So my first tour was in Northern Ireland, And because I was sort of fairly competent at doing what I did, I then got put onto the Puma 2, which was all about the assistance for the SF Special Forces guys working in.
So this is all helicopter now.
This is all helicopter now.
It's like our Pumas. It's like the Pumas that we've got. Yeah, I think I saw a photo.
Exactly. 100%. So I started to realize pretty quickly that the flying that we were starting to do, targeted operations against IRA terrorists, which was my first tour in Northern Ireland. It was really interesting, and there was a lot of risk on. But also the great thing was, as the first tourist, where you don't have any hours, like, Pete, you were talking about flying the King Air at 250. Like, the place to go was Northern Ireland, because I got nearly 1,000 hours in my first tour in 3 years. And we were flying, it was 3 weeks on, 1 week off. We were flying for 3 weeks, and we were getting, goddamn, like 60, 70 hours a month, which is unheard of in the flying community. I mean, the jet guys were getting 10 hours a month at a time. So you're starting to learn your trade. You're starting to learn the helicopter. And, Pete, you'll be able to talk to this, is like you want to get to a point where you're flying something. It doesn't matter whether it's a jet or a helicopter or a multi-engine. But when you strap that thing onto you, it becomes part of your body. Yeah. And about 1,000 hours, it starts to become part of your body. And that's where you start
exploring,
and your fingers are going to places, switches on the cockpit, starting to maneuver the controls.
You're working on memory, muscle memory,
cognitive. It's all cognitive, and that's when you're starting to get really, really competent. Malcolm Gladwell, the author, his book Outliers talks about 10,000 hours. Yeah, and you look at Bill Gates, you look at the you look at the Beatles, you look at real people and bands and groups that we know who have become very successful. They've done it because they've got the 10,000 hours in. So Bill Gates went to MIT. MIT was one of the first universities to have a computer where you could punch in code. So that's how Bill Gates got ahead of the game. And so it's similar in the aviation world. Pete, you'll be able to speak to, there is nothing that compensates as much as getting flying hours under the belt. Get those experiences, coming down the approach and having an engine failure, coming down the approach and getting shot at. There is no simulator, there is no training that can provide for that type of experience. And we were getting that experience, and it made us really good really quickly.
You mentioned something interesting, and you said that you picked up the helicopter quite quick, your responses and what they were telling you. Do you think that was maybe from like the combat jet training? Do you think that's maybe a slightly more focused training? I know both things work differently, the way a helo works, the way the jets work. There's some similarities, but it's also completely different in feel. You've got extra inputs and things that you wouldn't normally have in the jet. But do you think that kind of prepared you a little bit of an advantage when you got into that scenario?
I don't think it's a good question, but I don't think it did. Like, Leonardo da Vinci designed the helicopter, and a helicopter it's actually not supposed to fly. Yeah. I mean, they've got automated systems now which make them really safe, but at the time when they were designed, they're the most unstable things in the world. They're just not supposed to get airborne. Yeah. So if you have an engine failure in a jet, Pete, you can talk to this. It's like an engine failure in a jet is that you whack off the throttles. You've got a lot of glide, especially if you turn it into wind. You can glide for a long time. Yeah. In a helicopter, you have double engine failure. That thing's going down. Yeah. And there ain't nothing you can do about it. So,
but it's not going down faster. You got this auto rotation.
I was going to say, there's auto rotate. What is that? Because that's the way you're like rotating the helicopter down with the blades.
So in the helicopter, you've got pedals, which are, so if this is the helicopter, the pedals allow you to have this direction. The collective lever is all about the power, and then you've got the cyclic, which allows you to basically, do that with the helicopter. If you have an engine failure in a helicopter, we're going into detail here, but you have to get the power off because you need to keep the rotors turning at all times. And as long as you can keep the rotors turning at all times, you'll get induced airflow going through the blades. Right. And if you get induced airflow going through the blades, you can have a relatively calm rate of descent. And at the end, and you pull in a load of power, which means when you pull in the blades will bite more air, and so you can cushion the landing. But you don't have the range that you have in a fixed wing.
You can't glide
if you have a failure. Yeah. So, I mean, going back to your original point, it's a very different skill set. Being able to hover a helicopter is incredibly different to getting a jet airborne off a runway or the skill sets that you need. So they're two very different things. I just happen, for some reason, to be quite comfortable in the helicopter environment and be able to excel in it in a way that I probably wouldn't be able to do in the jet world.
So it happened for a reason, huh?
Serendipity, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, that's just how it works. I mean, you've got to have the body for it.
I think I was quite chubby at the time, if I was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, currently he's 6'6" and about 112 kilograms of quivering passion. I mean, it's, you know, it's,
Can you just look into the camera and say that? Brilliant.
meet Mikey Kay. 6'6", 112 kilograms of quivering passion. You don't want to miss this. Tune in.
So that was the way it all started, and then obviously Bosnia happened, and then we were starting to get a lot of experience in helicopters in Kosovo. Actually, I got my wings and then went out to air base called Aviano, which is on the east coast of Italy, about an hour north of Venice. And I was the operations officer for all of the airborne early warning, the E3D Sentry, which basically is it's a big multi-engine. It looks like a corporate jet, but it's got this big radar. You've probably seen it. It's a radar on the top, and it manages the air picture,
Like
so it can
AWACS thing.
exactly on early warning, AWACS. And so I was the operations officer for that, but we were operating out of the same base as the Moondogs, and the Moondogs were United States Marine Corps who were flying the Growlers at the time. And
Hold on a second.
Moondogs
flying the Growlers.
Yeah.
What is a Growler?
It's the EA-6B. So 4-man cockpit, fixed wing, flies off the carriers, and their job basically was to go over Bosnia and with what's called a HARM missile. And the HARM is an anti-radiation missile. So we'd have the HARM. Basically, I was invited to go up with the Moondogs and do this mission as just got my wings, and I'm like,
cool.
hell yeah, I'll go and do that.
Definitely.
So that's where I started to get my passion for the weapon side. So you'd have this HARM missile, big one missile that straps onto the side of the jet, and you got these two operators in the back. And they've basically got these radar sensor systems on. As soon as the surface-to-air missile system switches on, looking at air, these guys detect where the radar frequency is coming from. They'll identify exactly what the surface-to-air missile system is through the algorithm. And then if it's deemed as a threat, off comes the HARM,
insane.
and it'll take it out. And the game of play was, so the surface-to-air missile system operators knew this. They knew that if they switched on their radar for too long, a HARM would be down their throat. And
HARM will come to them.
A HARM will, HARM by name, HARM by nature, right?
I like that one.
Exactly. HARM will come to them. So that's what would happen is they'd stick on, they'd do it for less than a minute, see what's out there. If there's nothing out there, they switch off again, because if they left it on and one of these operators down the back. So I was sat there in this Growler, which was the NATO
Mikey,
code name for EA-6B.
I mean, it's just not a Growler from Mavericks.
So I'm gonna add. I'm gonna add to the names. Did you see any Warthogs?
Oh, they're great.
There were no A-10s operating out of Aviano at the time, but I did in Afghanistan. That's another story. We'll come on to that. Anyway, just to finish this one. So I go up and we do this whole sortie. Clint is the captain, and he's just a legend. He's just like U.S. Marine Corps captain. Come down. I'm like grinning from fucking ear to ear at this point. I'm 22 years old. I've just been over Bosnia. I've been with this amazing crew that are locking up surface-to-air missile systems with HARM. And now I've got this thing in my head where I'm like, flying is one thing, right? Flying an airplane is one thing. Operating an airplane is another thing. So it's the operating of an aircraft that gets you combat ready. It gets you into combat, and it allows you, whether you're flying in formation or as a singleton, that's what will either make you live or die. And I wanted to get ahead of that game. And that was the moment where I was like, right, I know what I want to do now. And then we went into Kosovo and applied all of that knowledge. Everything's about knowledge, right? Accumulation of knowledge, accumulation of experience. It may not directly relate, but this is a lesson in life. Like whatever you're doing, it may not be directly where you want to go, but at some point that information and knowledge will probably come back to you and be very, very useful. And then 9/11 happened, and we were training in the Arctic at the time. We used to go to northern Norway, and the reason for that was we had to learn how to operate in temperatures at -20, -30, because the idea was that Putin was going to come around the Northern Cape, and that would be one of the attack modes if he was ever want to come to Europe. So we had to go and do that. We did ice-breaking drills. It was, flying in -30, all the hydraulic fluids, all the fuel, everything has to be designed a certain way. The flying has to be designed a certain way. The weather will change in a heartbeat. You don't want to be caught in a snowstorm at minus 30 because you'll freeze to death if you have to land on and there's no one around to get you. So I was doing that. I was out there. I was actually a training captain at the time. So I was teaching new guys how to fly in that environment. And teaching is arguably really much harder in those environments than actually flying, because you've got a very new guy or girl, they're very inexperienced, but you have to give them the leeway to be able to make decisions themselves, but you don't want obviously you don't want that decision to run too far where it would compromise the safety of the crew. So we're doing this whole like 2-ship drop off, and the weather starts to come in, and our base was behind a ridge, and the weather came down onto the ridge, which means then we had to go 10 miles out into the sea to come around the ridge to come back in. We land on in a snowstorm south of the ridge, and then we sit there, and then the cloud, again, as the weather comes in, the weather disappears, and now I look at my fuel gauges, and I don't have enough fuel to get back to the base. So I now landed on, so I'm like, shit, and there's a lot of ego involved in this stuff, all right? So the last thing you want to do as a senior pilot on the squadron is be caught out with fuel, have to ring the boss up and go,
sorry, we're stuck.
Can you send out the Bowser? Can you send out the fuel Bowser? Because he will send out the fuel Bowser, but fuck me, you'll get a lot of banter in the bar that
when
night.
you come back.
Spuy 12 months. So he does all this stuff, and I ring him up, and he goes, all right, Mikey, no worries. I totally get it. You're safe. That's cool. Sends out the Bowser. The Bowser's 3 hours away. So we're sat. We're fine. Lights coming down. Anyway, about 15 minutes later, we're sat in this field, and we're told, like, if you're going to land on in a field and you need fuel, make sure that you land on somewhere which is quite close to a road, right? Because they want to send a Bowser out to you, and you want to make it accessible. So 15 minutes later, we're sat there, and we're in the middle of nowhere, but we are next to this road. I made sure of that. We start to hear this rumbling. It's just like, this fucking rumbling grows louder and louder and louder. Like, over the horizon comes this convoy of trucks.
What?
Convoy of trucks. I'm like, fucking hell, I'm looking on the map. I'm like, we're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's a big operation going on, but so this guy, the guy at the front of the truck, pulls up, and he winds down his window, and he's Norwegian. I'm gonna do my best Norwegian accent. And he goes, "Hey guys, what's going on?" I'm like, "Hello, fella. We're kind of run out of fuel." He goes, "What type of fuel?" I said, F-34. He goes, "Can you take F-35? Yeah, I could take F-35. The difference between F-34 and F-35 is it's got anti-icing and octane, and it's got some inhibitors in it, so it allows you to fly. But in order to get back to base, I could take F-35. I remember my ego's on the line.
Yeah.
So he goes, no problem. And he radios back to like number 4 in the convoy, who's a tanker. A tanker Bowser with F-35 on it.
No way.
So they put us in. Anyway, so I'm going to surprise my boss now. So I get airborne as the 2-ship. We get back into base. And his name's Richie. He's passed away now, bless him. I love him to bits. And he looks at me and goes, "Hang on, I've just spoken to the Bowser. He's like an hour away from you." And I'm like, "Don't ask." Just ask the Bowser to come back. We're all good. So technically, I saved my hide based on these Norwegian guys.
What's the odds of that happening? I mean, really?
10 billion to 1 as far as I was concerned.
Where were they off to? Were they just cruising around?
I mean, they were
on route.
So it was a big training operation happening all over Northern Norway, and the F-35 is used to refill generators and all that stuff. So they were just going around bases, but they just happened to pass me at the time. And then I thought, you know what it's like as an aviator? You're like, sometimes you're just blessed. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. But sometimes you're just like, you know what? If I've got this little bit of luck on my side in this aviation career,
I'll make it.
I'm going to do this.
I'm going to do good. That's insane.
Yeah, but let's forward one little bit now. I mean, it's quite an exciting story. Very hard to follow, though. I mean, you're very fast.
And that's 20 years of that, right? I mean, you were in the military for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Give or take.
20.
20 years. And so which stage was that? That little story you told me now. Was that year 5, 10?
That was 1998. So it was like my second tour on helis. This is pre 9/11, remember? So everything that we were doing was Arctic, it was temperate, it was like Kosovo, Baltics, and then 9/11 happened, and then the whole fucking thing changed.
Yeah. And so then I heard 9/11, but you just said it's pre 9/11. So then the Iraq factor came into the play, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 2003. So 9/11 happened, and then obviously we'd always been training in Arctic. We've been training in temperate environments, so woods, and now the shit's going down in the Middle East, and so everything has to change. So you have to adapt to flying in
different terrain,
desert. You have to fly in hot and high conditions.
So just to get a perspective, because there was all about this mass production and this weaponry of mass destruction, which was a big thing that the world was focusing on. I mean, you as a helicopter pilot going into a mission, I'm guessing that your mission scope or orders would be attack that target. You wouldn't really know the politics behind it, or maybe the reason behind it. It's just a question that I'm asking you now.
Yeah, so now where I am, which is an investigative journalist on BBC News, you have to understand the politics and why warfare happens. And as a military person, an operator, you are what we call the blunt end of foreign policy. So we're the blunt tool of foreign policy when politics fails. And at the time when Iraq 2003 came around, you're absolutely right, Pete, there were two components. There was WMD, weapons of mass destruction, and there was ties of Saddam Hussein to Al Qaeda, both of which were proved to be false.
Yep.
And so there was a line obviously being pushed on those two by George W. Bush, by Rumsey, by Rumsfeld, and by Dick Cheney, and then obviously Tony Blair bought into that. But the political mechanisms are in the UK that the Houses of Parliament have to vote on whether the UK gets involved in military action. Now, the difference between that and the US was George Bush basically signed in to law what's called the Authorization for the Use of Military Force after 9/11, which basically meant any sitting president in the US could launch military operations on any country without a vote from the House of Representatives or the Senate and go to war. That wasn't the case in the UK. And so Tony Blair had to basically go in front of the Houses of Parliament and persuade the Houses of Parliament to vote on whether the UK joined the US on the Iraq War, axis of terror, all that jargon. And so as a military operator at the time, we're the blunt end of foreign policy, and whatever the decision is made in the UK government, we got to go.
It's an order.
It's an order, and we have to do it. And we have to respect that there is a system, there's a mechanism, there's a process that we follow. And so it was never really a question in my mind in 2003 in March when I first went into Iraq from Ali al-Salem in Kuwait, which was into the south of Iraq, into the Basra area. Qasar was the first major operation that we did. There was never a question that what we were doing wasn't right. And you think like that because there was no evidence to prove what Tony Blair and what Bush at the time were pushing in terms of the intelligence agencies. You remember Colin Powell said, "You break it, you fix it," though. And that was an important moment in, I think, the run-up to that.
So from political point of view, they essentially keep you as the operational guys, the attack helicopter pilot, for example.
Assault helicopter.
You'd get the brief, attack this target. You wouldn't question it. You wouldn't really have a background knowledge of it either. There would be no political influence. You're purely there as a military force representing.
Run the objective.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you run it.
Yeah, it comes in as what's called an ATO, an air tasking order.
Yeah.
And then the air tasking order has all of the flight operations that day. And a lot of them in the assault helicopter world, before I started getting involved with the Special Forces guys, was, putting troops from here to here, Eagle VCPs, vehicle checkpoints, doing surveillance stuff. And that's just That's part of the air tasking order. You get assigned a call sign, Mustang, Fang, whatever it is, and you go and do that. And you don't even question the political side. The political side is so far out of your sphere.
I suppose you just want to do the objective and stay alive.
100%.
Get out of there with the team. Make sure everyone's safe.
Exactly.
But I mean, you're running the assault helicopters now. So my question is, what is on those helicopters in terms of like armaments and stuff? I mean, obviously you got the crew, the guys that you're taking somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they've got something hanging off the side, some support.
Yeah. Two GPMGs, general purpose machine guns, just two hanging out the door, and that's it really. So people often mistake attack and assault helicopter pilot.
Yeah, two different things.
Yeah, attack helicopter pilot basically is an Apache gunslinger.
Yeah.
So they'll have all sorts of shit that will create harm, from hellfires to a chain gun on the front. That is that's a fast jet with a rotor blade on it. Yeah. It's the systems inside an Apache are as if not more complicated than what you see on a lot of fast jet systems at the moment. So very different to assault helicopters. Assault helicopters are basically putting men and women into an area where they can then gain control of ground.
And that would be the first step before things like Apache start flying in. I mean, obviously you want to get boots on the ground.
So fast forward a little bit, when I was working up in Baghdad and we were working with the SF operation, Special Forces operation, all happens at the same time. So, for example, the missions there were, there's a spider network of, a spider network basically is Al-Qaeda, for example. So the spider network would, through intelligence agencies, identify who's the guy at the top of the chain. So it was Al-Sakawi at the time. And then below him, you have his number 2 is 2IC. And under that, you've got the guy responsible for recruitment, the guy responsible for weapons, the guy responsible for bomb making, the guy responsible for, targeted operations. And eventually through what's called ELINT, and HUMINT. ELINT is electronic intelligence, so basically listening into phone calls, understanding who's who, understanding what their intent is. HUMINT is human intelligence, so the CIA, MI6, all these people groom locals to become informants, so people in certain areas that are identified to have a certain amount of knowledge, put them on the payroll. They will then start, and it's very risky for them, like it is for interpreters, but, they start feeding information back, and that way you build up a picture, an intelligence picture of this spider network. And so what would happen is that we'd be in Baghdad, the intelligence services would say, all right, we've got a certain amount of intelligence to know that this person who we've got on the spider network, they've identified this person, a bad lad, is going to be in this location in bed at night. We need to get airborne as a force ship, and we need to go and apprehend that person, capture or kill. And so we do that, and in doing that, we'd have 4 Puma helicopters, which it was for me at low level over the city. We'd have Apaches in support for close quarters combat. We'd have either a couple of F-16s or whatever's available for what's called CAS, close air support. We'd have a minimum of 2 Predators drones. It's called the stack, right? And it's called the stack because you have these different aviation capabilities at different levels. And then right at the very top, you've got a C-130, which was called an airborne talk-through. And the airborne talk-through C-30 was basically allowing communications, because communications are everything in combat, and communications break down very, very quickly. And when they do, like, shit goes down, shit goes wrong.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that. I mean,
you've
got all these different layers, and are you guys all like communicating with each other? Or are you sort of all listening into a broadcast that's coming from HQ?
Goes back through a central operations room. And then...
So I can imagine with all the different factors involved, you can't, if you get a frequency wrong there,
right,
you're screwed.
Right. You get a frequency wrong, or a frequency that's jammed, or a problem in the helicopter, or a problem in the jet, or a problem in...
So you would just bail out in that case, or...
you'd have what's called go-no-goes. And so there'd be certain scenarios where if you lost comms, if you lost Predator was the drone, if you lost eyes onto the target, there would be certain go-no-goes, and that would be all in the pre-brief. So you knew instantly, as soon as the capability goes down, you'd know instantly whether you could keep going or not.
Like a certain fail-safe. So if you're knowing if if you're going to go to this position, there's something there during that flight, maybe you miss it, I need to still end up there. But if it's something mission critical, then...
Right, and it all depends on, a lot of it depends actually on the value of the target. So if you're looking at someone like Al-Sakawi, who is cutting people's heads off regularly on camera, you would probably take certain risks that you might not take with another target.
To try and get the mission.
Yeah, because, those people only turned up on intelligence every now and again, if at all.
Yeah.
They were prize assets. And a lot of the time, the approval to go and do it would have to go right up into the higher echelons of government.
So you'd have to take that chance.
Yeah, and that's where the airmanship thing comes down. It's like, ultimately, the safety of your crew and the people on board there's no point impressing if you're going to kill, not just you and your crew, but 8 very, very highly trained SF guys on board.
Yeah.
So those are the decisions you have to make when you get to those echelons as a captain on whether you press or not.
And then is there any like, can I say, situations where you would have to like say, right, we're going to do this, but turn it over to the crew and say, guys, are we going forward?
Always a crew decision, and that's, as a fast jet guy, especially in today's fast jet world where you've got, the Typhoon, which is single seat, you've got the F-35, which is single seat, the F-22 Raptor, which is single seat, the F-15E is 2-seat, which is unusual these days, but I think 2-seat is really good. But most of it is single seat. So as a single seat guy, you have the hammer on everything. You don't have to discuss it. There's no crew resource management, CRM, which is huge in the civilian agency and corporate jet industry.
Yep.
But it also became really important in the helicopter world as well. Is it like if the crew chief wasn't comfortable and you were, you have to go with the crew chief, sort of, or either talk him through a scenario and make him feel comfortable or her feel comfortable, and then get buy-in. You had to get buy-in from the crew.
Okay, so I want to know if you've had any hairy moments. Shot down, shot at, clink clink through the floorboards, and how you handle it and what happened.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good question, because the first thing is that if you're being targeted by what we call small arms fire, which is anything from a pistol to an AK or even a Dushka or a GPMG, that's called small arms fire. So it's not a man-pad, a man-portable air defense system where it's a shoulder-launched surface-to-air missile. Yeah. But if there's there are times where we landed where we'd land, shut down, we'd get out, and there'd be little light holes coming through the back of the helicopter, and you're like, oh, fuck.
I never heard that.
We've actually been... So what I'm saying is that the times where you could be shot at and hit, and the bullet's gone through the fuselage. Yeah. And the only time you'd ever see it is when you land, and you can just see the little light hole coming through.
Because unless it's coming straight at you, you won't really hear it. You got your headphones on. You've got the helo making enough noise.
Oh my god, like vibration on a helo, and the noise in a helo is just ridiculous. It's like, so there'll be that a lot of the time. Thankfully, a lot of the places we operated in, the surface-to-air missile system threat was huge, because that's the biggest threat to us.
That's scary.
And the biggest threat was the man-pad. So I don't know if you remember in the Afghan war when the Soviets, not Russians, but the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 1980s. The Mujahideen were obviously the opposing force to the Russians and the Soviets in Afghanistan. And so what the CIA figured out is that the dominance of the Soviets in Afghanistan was a lot of it was imposed by air power. So Hind gunships, Su-25 Frogfoots, and that was what was creating the chaos for the Mujahideen. So the CIA goes, all right, we'll give these guys the FIM-92 Stinger. And the FIM-92 Stinger is a man-pad, man-portable air defense system, which was the most highly sophisticated portable system at the time, more than the SA-7, more than the SA-9. And the reason is because it had a counter flare rejection capability. What that means is...
so if they try and use countermeasures, it doesn't...
Right, so the countermeasures for a surface-to-air missile man-pad is a flare. And so we used to fly with a ton of flares, which are on boxes on the side.
To shoot them up.
And so that would be tied into an automated system which involved missile weapons sensors, there were 4 around the helicopter, and it all detects UV. So the sensor will pick up the ejection of a missile, the boost of the engine of the missile. So So you get a UV spike when it comes out
Is
of
that like the missile lock when you get that warning?
it's not the missile lock. No, when the missile comes out the pod, you get a spike on UV. When it then kicks in, the main engine kicks in and accelerates the speed. You get a spike on the UV, and all these things are in an algorithm on the missile weapon system sensor, which then talks to the flare capability. And if you put them auto, it will kick them out automatically. Now the problem is that UV is created by lots of different things, including streetlights, that aren't necessarily a missile system, and you've only got a certain amount of these flares. So if you're flying at night, for example, and you're on auto, and it picks up a erroneous UV spike and
Chucks the flare.
punch out 4 flares every time, you're lighting yourself up.
Yeah, giving away your location.
Giving away your location, giving away your target. So if you're doing a night op, you never want to fly on auto, right? So it all depended on you. We had to, the bad guys were getting more experience about our capability, and it's about this tit for tat on trying to keep ahead of how you keep yourself safe. And so, so that's what we had to go through, and that's what we had to keep abreast of in order to keep ourselves safe in terms of the missile defense systems that we had. And then as time evolved, the Merlin was operating. Merlin's another helicopter that was operating in Iraq. That then had what's called a DIRCM, which is a laser system on the back of the helicopter that could. So man-portable air defense systems are all IR seeker heads, infrared seeker heads. So they target the heat signature of the engine. And the flare, when you pop out the flare, it's supposed to decoy the IR seeker head.
To show there's a heat signature, so to push
pull
it, of course.
Pull it away. Right? The FAM-92, going back to Afghanistan, Stinger, had that flare rejection capability. And so now what happened is the Mujahideen were trained to use these by the CIA, and they were just taking out Russian air power left, right, and Chelsea. And it was one of the moments of the change of the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan, and that was one of the reasons why ultimately defeated and they withdrew. So thankfully, going back to your question on, what was the hairiest moment and shot at and all the rest of it, we were very, very cognizant of what was the manpad threat in country, and thankfully, we used to go into areas where there wasn't a big manpad threat. So never really had a major moment where I was like, fuck. But I know a lot of Chinook pilots. Chinook's the 2 fucking beast, amazing helicopter.
Crazy thing,
a lot of guys and girls that in Afghanistan had moments like that. Not with manpads as such, but RPGs. So there's a famous story of an RPG going through the main rotor of a Chinook.
Insane.
And the Chinook is such a beast that they managed to fly it back and land it.
That's crazy.
Never had a moment like that. And actually the crew got a distinguished flying cross with that, which is one of the highest orders of. So never had any moments like that. And I'm quite happy to sit here and go.
I want to ask a question.
It's your podcast. You can.
When you go to
Whiskey Throttle.
when you
the Whiskey Throttle. This is the Whiskey Throttle podcast, just in case. Any doubt.
Because I think you may lose some of the attention because your description of all the weaponry in there is so technical. It's brilliant, and I want to know something. When you go to war, like let's take Iraq, you've got the Americans involved, you've got the UK involved, and I guess a couple of other allies. How do you guys communicate with each other? How's this all coordinated?
It's so NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's the biggest challenge when you're operating as what's called a multinational environment. Yeah. It's the biggest challenge to get on the same page with SOPs, standard operating procedures, TTPs, tactics training and protocols, communications. They're all operating off different operating systems that aren't compatible all of the time.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest challenges of going into what's called an ISAF operation, ISAF was Kosovo, ISAF was Afghanistan, is trying to get on the same page as your multinational partners. And it's really difficult. And so, I was reporting on my show on BBC News the other day when North Korean troops decided to come into the Kursk Oblast area of Russia. And one of the big things for me was, you've got people not only operating on different systems or operating with dissimilar, unfamiliar systems, but they don't even speak the same language. It's Russian versus North Korean. And so how do you have an effective fighting force when you can't interoperate integrate the way that you want to? And so it's a huge component when it comes to the effectiveness of a combined fighting force. And so, to your point, Pete,
it's quite a tricky,
massively.
tricky.
And to this day, this is why NATO are holding big training exercises, is to try and get on the same page. And I'm not even mentioned when you start talking on secure communications. Secure communications require crypto, and it all becomes incredibly different. And there were times in Iraq where actually we had to communicate on a mobile phone.
Jeez,
just because you don't have the Hotel Fox higher frequency communications is usually the only way that you can actually get over the distance, over the horizon communications in. And it's still to this day, even with all the technology we got. You look at SpaceX, you look at all of this incredible technology, the Gulfstream, you look at the F-22 Raptor, you look at the F-35, all of this stealth, you look at the drones, you look at everything that's going on. Communications has always been the hardest thing to try and catch up with. And going back to the civilian world, the civilian aviation world, even to this day, when the first person flew across the Atlantic, even to this day, you now have ADS-B, but 20 years ago, you didn't have ADS-B. And what that means is that if you're getting airborne out of the UK from London and flying to New York, primary radar only exists to about 200 nautical miles off the coast. Then you have secondary surveillance radar. Secondary surveillance radar is all about picking up the transponder squawk. That only operates to about 250. And so I don't know if you remember MH370, the 777 that disappeared when it was flying from Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the reason they couldn't find it is because as soon as the transponder is turned off and as soon as that disappears off primary radar, there is no other way of tracking that. And the way that they do it, Pete, you'll be able to speak to this better than me, is that the way that you do it over a transatlantic or a large ocean crossing is you're literally just pinning in a text where you are on a reporting point to know that you're at the right point across the air corridor. Is that fairly fair?
Yeah. What do you think happened there?
MH370. CNN hired me for 3 months as the military expert, but also the guy that knows all about radar and whatnot. And to this day, I think it's the biggest unsolved aviation mystery, and I'm including Amelia Earhart in that. You had 280-ish souls on board, disappeared, and the only thing they found was a flaperon that turned up in Sri Lanka, months later.
There was something that landed up on the beach in Mauritius as well, I believe.
Yeah.
But they could link that positively to the plane.
Yeah, because it had some serial numbers on it. But the big thing about that, and this is what we were going through.
My conspiracy theory mind is going way. Like,
I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
No, but I mean, somebody could have just dropped something in the ocean on purpose.
Yeah, but it's
a bot like that.
Did you serialized? Is he sat in the ejection seat where we can? Do you know that James Bond ejection handle? We can just eject him.
I thought we should make that part of the podcast actually.
But what's really interesting, just to sort of tap off on the MH370 thing, is that the way they managed to track the general area of where the jet had gone is because the Rolls-Royce engines that were on the jet, there's a system on the Rolls-Royce engines that pings back data to an Inmarsat satellite. An Inmarsat satellite is a stationary satellite over the Pacific. And they managed to get some very, very intelligent people, way more intelligent than me, to look at the data that came back from those engines and geolocate where the pings were coming from.
That's incredible.
And that's where they found it. It was roughly, Pete, wasn't it, off the northwestern coast of Australia somewhere.
Yeah.
But the size was so great and the ocean is so huge and the currents are so strong that as soon as this thing goes into the drink, it's gone. So there was a lot of really interesting information and learning from my own perspective of how that happened. But things like quick reaction alert.
But for pilots to have to make those systems not work in the cockpit, all the general stuff, the transponders and the position locators, the IRSs, the flight management systems. I mean, they managed to isolate them and make them totally uncommunicatable to the outside world. But of course, they forgot about one or two little sensors that come from the engine. That I would imagine would have had to be done purposefully.
Right. So one option is how do you turn the transponder off and just, so people.
Well, that's easy. You just turn it off. But
it has to be so it has to be manually done by someone from the crew.
yeah,
And
it has to be done by the crew.
Yeah, and the transponder is this little box that has 4 numbers on it, and when you get onto tower, originally they'll ask you to squawk a 4-digit number. So, for example, Malaysian 370 squawk 2614, and that will be the squawk that when they get airborne, they'll turn it on.
Yeah.
And then they'll go on to approach. They'll go on to approach and say Malaysian 370 approach, climbing on flight plan or whatever. And they'll say identified squawking 4620 or whatever it was. And then you can see the 4620 on the radar screen. So,
but to take that out and the communication system with the ground, they would literally have had to take the box out and the actual.
So you can't. So on the 777. And I spoke to lots of mates who are 777 captains and first officers. You can't turn the transponder off unless you physically turn it off. You can't. There's no way.
Turn it off.
There's the circuit breakers are all outside of the cockpit, underneath the nose of the aeroplane that an engineer needs to be able to play with. So the big question was, can that be done in flight?
Yeah, it can. You can turn it off in flight.
You can turn the transponder off, but you can't flick the circuit breaker off in flight. It has to be done by an engineer.
Yeah,
or
that's
someone
why I
else.
think somebody mechanically removed that box.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it had to be removed to cut off communication.
Fact, the transponder stopped transponding.
Yeah.
Fact. How that happened, no one knows. Yeah.
And what about UFOs? I mean, we've got so much going on at the moment about UFOs.
You see, they've actually renamed that now. They don't call it UFOs anymore.
Yeah,
Before we do UFOs, can I get another whiskey?
It's I think another whiskey. I mean, come on.
Thanks, Jen. This is Genevieve, by the way. Jen, say hi.
Okay.
There we go. She really didn't want to do that. Really didn't want to do that. I do have a UFO story, which I can't explain, and I am the biggest.
You can tell the story, but you can't explain it. Okay.
Non-conspiracy theory in the world, but there is something that's happened.
This is actual fact shit that's going on here. I mean, this is all about
breaking news.
Breaking news. All these things suddenly coming out of the woodwork now. But I mean, are you going to relate to that, or are you related to the current scenarios where there's
let me get my whiskey.
100 bloody?
Let me get my whiskey and I'll talk. But in the meantime, I'm Leon. Why are you? Like,
I'd like to have a pee.
You're the co-host of Whiskey Throttle.
Yeah.
What's going on with you?
What's the deal?
Yeah.
I'm just a guy that sits here, talks a bit of nonsense.
That's fact.
Guns, cars, military. I mean, man, I've been waiting to talk to you. This is right up my alley.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you. Thank you, Jen. It's
so you can carry on talking about it, but I'm just going for pee.
All right. Van der Spey's going to the bathroom. This is what happens when you get older, by the way.
Tea break.
Don't be too long. And watch that camera.
That one.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're a man of note. I'm just sat here answering your questions. But what's your life story?
Oh man. Well, not to cover too much of the stuff.
Don't get shy on me now. Why? Why have you turned the light? There we go.
Yeah. Turn the light on.
Maybe that was a sign.
I know, right? The aha moment.
About this.
I've always been into the car side of things from a kid. I've had many influences on my life, and I think my interests kind of run parallel to that, and they always have.
Thanks, Jen.
So, without sounding too generalistic, I mean, obviously cars, guns, military. My family was all military, and South African Secret Service and police and army.
Hang on. South African Secret Service.
Yeah.
Don't drop that one into conversation and not expect me to follow up on that.
Look, I can't really say which family member, but some things are NDA worthy.
Are we NDA? Are we talking like MI5 domestic? Are we talking MI6 foreign? Are we talking
mostly domestic, but anything touching South Africa. So if it was within the borders or slightly outside, there was a bit of action. I actually So this family member of mine that was involved in the South African Secret Service for many years. You know when you watch the movies, right? And they always go to these like weird locations, like you're going to the office, right? This is the special Secret Service office. And
Langley.
Exactly, right. and you walk up and it's like a post office, and they go through like a back door somewhere, and then all of a sudden they push a button and doors open and there's gun racks and all sorts of funny stuff. I had a very similar thing, because I went into a local main road, so not too far from where I grew up, and it was like normal, everyday life. There's a couple of stores, there's furniture stores around, guys drive. It's normal, busy main road. And I go to this door with my dad, and we're standing there now to go and visit this family member. And I remember looking at this place, I'm like, this doesn't look like, like something special. But it's this weird door with like a little access port, and, you kind of, I don't know if you call it ring the doorbell.
Is it like the safe house?
No, this is like operations. This is like ops. Wow. Right? So we get to this place that my dad said he needed to go, and obviously they identified and said, okay, yes, we know him, so you can come inside. And this door opens like off street, and you walk in, you go through like this little passage, and all of a sudden there's just like ops. I mean, it's there's desks, there's people walking around, there's phones ringing. It's literally feels like I walked into like a spy movie. It was exactly that thing.
How did you get access?
So we went to go visit this family member of mine, and my dad was obviously also in the police force. So there was like
obviously, I don't think he was obviously in the police force. But he was in the police force.
He was in the police force, so I didn't cover that part. So he was in the police force. My uncle was also in the force. My grandfather was World War II. He fought in Egypt, Al Alamein. So he was part of one of the big main gunneries, or the gun. He was in charge of a battalion of guns, and it just so happened that part of the force, and I loosely know the history that that's kind of like where the World War II took a little bit of a turn was in Al Alamein, was during that conflict, and he was and he was part of the South African artillery kind of commanding that battalion.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of like where these things run through my veins, And
is your grandfather still around?
Unfortunately, not. I never met him. He passed away at a young age before I even existed. But I've got photos, and I've got his discharge and all sorts of things.
I'd love to look into that detail, because he's known General Kenneth van der Spuy.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. I've got all his discharge details and his rank and all the stuff that he was. So I actually came across it through a box. So obviously with the military stuff, I like collecting insignia. So I've got like Soviet badges. I've got badges from the Royal Army as well. I've got those, the top hats that those guys wear with those big badges. I got one of those. I've got a lot of South African insignia. I got stuff from Australia, World War II, so I got a box of stuff. And when I was going through that, buried right in the bottom was like all this paperwork that I had forgotten I actually had. So the military stuff, I kind of grew up and that kind of took me on a route of I've started hunting with my dad, and I actually had this conversation with Peter when we did our first episode, and I said I've been secretly training for something that I don't know what I'm going to do with.
I think we all have.
I've secretly gone through this whole I think my dad was like, I've got a plan for this kid. I'm going to teach him stuff he's not going to know why. But when the time comes, you'll know.
It goes back to that point, right? It's like whatever you do, absorb it and take it forward, and at some point it'll come back, and you'll be like, that's the reason why.
And that led me to getting into shooting at a young age and professional shooting as well. So I won SA champs like many years ago, local provincial champ twice, and then while I was doing all this stuff, I was also doing things like judo and jiu-jitsu and wrestling, amateur wrestling, and on the Western Province circuit, so on the provincial circuits we call it. So I was always, that's one side of my life, and then the other side of my life.
Hang on, wait a minute.
I was about to say the same thing. Hold on. Yeah.
So Barrett .5 cal, sniping rifle.
Yeah,
have you shot one?
Yeah, that was my bucket list item that came true a couple of months ago. It was actually when one of my old companies I left, they gave me like this voucher to go shooting, right? And obviously through the years, I've pretty much shot everything already. So there's nothing I haven't shot. But the 50 cal. And I can tell you one thing, nothing prepares you, not for the recoil. I mean, we had this discussion a little bit earlier on. Like the recoil, it kicks, all right. But the blowback from that rifle is unreal. Like, I didn't feel it as much, but everybody standing behind me, my wife standing behind me, like everybody like gave a scream when that thing went off. And it wasn't for the shot. It was the wave that went through them, that they said they felt like the shock wave go through them.
Wow.
And you don't feel it like I know we spoke earlier about it. Like, normally on like handguns and that, you've got compensators to help with like recoil and blowback and so on. And this isn't. I forget the name, but it's not a compensator in the front. It's almost like a chamber just dispersing that energy. So it's got nothing to do with the recoil or the sound really. It's just to get rid of all of that bent up energy and coming out of that barrel.
You know what? I just think this is what separates an Afrikaans person from a normal average Welshman like me. There are very few people that I've spoken to who fired a Barrett 50 cal who have gone, yeah, it wasn't really the recoil. Every other person I'm like is like, my fucking shoulder really hurts and I'm going to go to surgery now to get that shit. Afrikaans guys go, yeah, it was just like firing a .22 pop, whatever. That's Afrikaans guys for you.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I broke my shooting experience with big guns. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and my dad handed me his semi-automatic Beretta shotgun and said, "Here you go." And my arms wasn't long enough to hold the front of the gun, so he was kind of holding it, and I was just rattling off for the trigger, and that thing shattered my shoulder. I walked away with a big blue mark here, and he's like, "Now you've been anointed. Now you can start shooting." And from there, everything else was pretty easy.
So when you said I broke, I thought you said you broke your shoulder. But okay.
Well, there's an interesting story behind something like that, I can tell you.
I thought I'm 6'6" and I'm 110 kilograms, and I'm sat in front of you two oaks, and I'm like, you become very humble very quickly when you sit in front of two really large Afrikaans guys. You're like, that's why the rugby teams do so well.
I want to know, what do you use a 50 caliber rifle for?
Long distance sniping.
Shoot what?
Long distance sniping. I mean, you could
sniping?
hit. That's a kilometer shot. That's 1,000 meters plus. That's actually another interesting point. So we're talking. We had a conversation last week before.
A couple of years ago, before I met you.
Exactly. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about like rifles and stuff. And when I'd been shooting competition, I'd already been shooting about 3 or 4 years. And the coach at the time, he was an ex-military guy, what we called the recce's, obviously,
Yeah.
And the FN R1 rifle was like standard issue for
that's
everyone.
what I used to shoot.
That was the rifle to shoot with, right? And he brought one to the range. I never forget it. It was old Milnerton shooting range in Cape Town. Those guys that are listening that know it will know exactly what I'm talking about. And this range doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. The houses kind of grew over. They sold the range. It doesn't exist anymore. But on this range, they had the long distance section. So they had 1,000 meter target. They had what they called
kilometer.
1 kilometer. They had what they called the gong. Now, the gong was a piece of plate, steel plate, it's about that thick, right? And it was roughly, I would say maybe almost 1.5 meters, almost 2 meters, in diameter, hanging on a set of chains at the 1 kilometer mark.
Which looks like less than a postage stamp at 1 kilometer.
I can see where the gong's coming from with the 50 caliber fucking thing.
So this wasn't even the 50. So my coach comes to the range, sandbags obviously, because you're not going to hit anything at that distance if that thing's not buttoned down onto the ground. You're not getting anywhere, no matter how good you are, especially at that distance. So he puts the R1 down and he says, "Settle in. You see the gong? We're going to go for it." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We're going to go for it." I'm like, "Okay." So where's the scope? Where's it?
Still sight.
Open sights, iron sights.
Yeah.
On an R1.
That's how I used to shoot.
At 1 kilometer. So you mentioned exactly that. So you put that cross or that front
little V.
The little you put the front sight over the gong at 1 kilometer. It's literally like a pinprick behind there. So you can't see it. You can't see the target once you put that crosshair or that that front sight over it, right? So now you're lining it up. But luckily for me, I mean, I had my coach there, and he was like the spotter. So he's got the scope next to me, you know, like the sniper guys, they all got their spotters. So I've got my spotter next to me. And he's like, right, you get 2 shots. That's it. If you don't hit it the second shot, then you're just not good enough. So I'm like, well, no pressure really. So he kind of gave me a little bit of, he says, look, if you adjust the rear sight, this is roughly the distances you get. He didn't want to give the secret away, but he kind of wanted me to figure it out. So I'm okay, adjust the back sight a little bit. I think this is more or less where it's going to be, and I pull the first shot. And I'm probably about 10 meters short, and I'm slightly off to the right.
Not bad for a K.
Yeah.
Not bad for a K.
It was a drop shot, you know. And
Tester.
Exactly. So, but I had a little bit of input to say, you know, it says, you know, you need to kind of be in this range. You take it however you want it. Something, okay, I'm a couple of meters out, trying to do a little bit of, okay, right. So push the sight a little bit further in, settle down. But now I can't go too far left because you adjust maybe a millimeter here and you're off by like 20, 30 meters on the target. Easy. You're going to miss it completely. And
you've got wind, and you've got heat,
yeah,
and you've got
I mean,
mirage
it's like middle of the day, maybe it was somewhere around midday. Sun's right above you, so pull the second shot now. But the beauty about this is obviously, you know, a round travels fast, but you never know how fast it really travels over a kilometer. So when that shot goes, you wait a few seconds and you hope to hear dong in the background, right?
Yeah, the gong.
Pull the shot off, squeeze it, everything just feels good. And you know, like, I mean, in the military, you guys shoot, right? You shoot targets.
Terribly, but yeah.
I don't think so. So when you're shooting at a target, when you pull the trigger, you know if you're going to hit it or not before the bullet even hits. You know if it's a good shot. And I just had this feeling, and I just heard, shot go, hear the gong. So that was my, like, okay, that's pretty cool. I like that, you know.
I had the wonderful opportunity of when I left the military, I was on a show called Ultimate Soldier Challenge, and
Just slowly.
That was really cool.
The Ultimate
Soldier
Challenge. Mm.
So it was.
You need to explain that.
For
listeners who don't know what that is, this is an event.
So I left the military in 2012 and wanted to get into reporting, war reporting, TV hosting, using the knowledge. You know? The reason this whole podcast exists, Whiskey Throttle, is because Pete Van der Spey has got a knowledge across aviation and
it's a really
racing
cool
car
stories.
driving. And, you know, the reason this podcast exists is because you've got this amazing knowledge that you want to share. And I had this amazing knowledge that I wanted to share. And so I went to New York, got married to a New York girl. And my agent calls me. Agents are really hard to get when you're getting into the business. They don't want to touch you. I've got a fairly interesting background where the agent was like, all right, I think I can make money from you. And that's all they want to do is make money. So he's like, all right. So he phones me up. I've been out of the military for like 6 months. And he goes, Mikey, he goes, History Channel are doing this new show. It's called Ultimate Soldier Challenge. I'm like, brilliant. He goes, but everyone who goes on it, all the competitors have to be ex-special forces. So, well, I'm not. And he goes, all right, well, what have you done? I said, well, I used to drop them onto the target, but I was never badged. I never did selection. I'm not SAS. I'm not SBS. And he goes, okay. He says, well, can we find some SAS guys that want to do this? I said, you won't. This was before the days of SAS, whose days Wins and Foxy and those guys who are brilliant blokes. But you know, when you're and stuff, you're not signed to secrecy, but it's just it's a thing you do and it's in the shadows, right? Yeah. So I just said to them, I said to the producers, I said, you're going to find it really hard to find someone from Britain who's going to come in and do this. And they're like, all right. They're like, would you have a partner that might be someone that might want to come and do this with you? I said, yeah, there's one guy called John McNish. I'm like, oh, who's he? So John is he's about 6'4", 6'5", massive, and the best person you ever want in a fight with you. Like, he is talented when it comes to neutralizing the threat.
He knows what he's doing.
And we've been out on the lash a few times in our young careers as you know, 20 years old, and anytime anyone came anywhere near us, he'd neutralize the threat in a heartbeat, which I thought was quite impressive at the time, given he probably had about 90 kilos. And he had this big quiff on his head, and he was a handsome fuck. And so I said, look, yeah, I've got a guy in mind, because his name's John McNish. He'd left the military. He was ex-SF SG, Special Forces Support Group, so wasn't badged, but SF operations were growing at such a rapid rate that they needed to bring in an auxiliary part, whether it was para or whether it was RF regiment, to support what the SF guys were doing, which was fairly sort of similar operations, but they didn't have to go through selection. So John had done a lot of that, and I'd known John through his whole career on that. But John had moved to Perth, Australia. So I gave him a call and I said, John, there's this show coming up on History Channel. He goes, all right, mate, what is it? So I said, it's basically we're going to go up against 82nd Airborne, Rangers, who I don't know who it is, but there's going to be loads of highly experienced guys there. You up for it? And he goes, so he moved to Australia for about a year and he's already developing a bit of an Australian twang. And he goes, fuck yeah, mate, let's do it. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm like, what's that in British? And he goes, yeah, let's absolutely bang on, let's do it. So,
yeah, exactly.
So we ended up doing it. And our show was us against the Rangers and this contractor crew. And there was one Spetsnaz guy and there was this MMA fighter. And the first the first competition was using sniper rifles. So they'd set up, there was three staging sites of sandbags, and the target, there were two targets. And each had an explosive detonator, which was about this big in the head, next to the other head. And you had to run 200 meters in the opposite direction, pick up the weapon, the ammunition, the scope, come back, lock it in, and then start firing. Whoever took out the first two targets was, the winner. And so I said to John, John, mate, you firing long barrel weapons is your thing. Do you want to be the shooter? And he looked at me and goes, you're actually quite a good shot, aren't you, Mikey? And I'm like, well, yeah, bizarrely, for a helicopter pilot, it was not a bad shot. He goes, you shoot, I'll get the scope. I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. I said, this is the strategy. I said, when you run back to get the scope, or when we run back to get the scope, the ammunition and the rifle, I said, go and get the rifle, go and get the ammunition. I'll pick up the scope, but I'm going to walk. You run, get back, stick the magazine in the rifle, and just let me come in and slide, take a deep breath, and then start going for it. And he goes, yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Because you need that stability early on.
The heartbeat, right?
Yeah. And I think just while you're busy saying that, it's important to give this context, because that's damn hard. Yeah. Because when you put a scope on a rifle and you sight that rifle in...
It's a side scope, so it wasn't a scope on the rifle.
Putting it on the side.
It was a spotter, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you're going to have to shoot that still.
Yeah.
Shoot the rifle still, yeah.
Yeah.
You're just not going to go put something down and off you go.
No, but it's all about heartbeat at that point, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want a guy that's out of breath.
Yeah, your heart rate's down, so that thing's bouncing away while you're trying to keep your sights picture
Exactly. So I said to him, look, I'll casually go and get the scope. So literally the Rangers guys and the contractors are like offloading these rounds. They got about 3 or 4 out before I'd even slotted into the prone position.
Too quick to the party.
Yeah, and they were missing. And I slid it in. He'd already put the magazine in, locked it, loaded it, and so there was a bullet in the chamber. So I looked at the target, held it, rounds going off around me, and then just slowly squeezed the trigger. And it's the first shot. It was the first bullet that came out of the rifle, and it hit the left target, knocked the target, and then that exploded into the right target and took the right target out. And so
Two in one.
Two in one.
Two shots.
And so the game was over.
One shot.
Brilliant. Game over.
Game was over. And none of the producers knew what to do, because they were like, so the whistle was called. The host was like, all right, we've got to talk about this. And then eventually they made the decision of like, this is what happens in warfare, right? This is the realities of warfare, unpredictability, all the rest of it. So the interviews that they conducted with the Rangers, the Rangers guy, I'll never forget it. He's a brilliant bloke. He's an ex-regimental sergeant major, handsome-looking guy in the Rangers. He just looked into camera and goes, brutal. It's fucking
They must have felt destroyed.
fucking brutal.
Good shot on you, though. Well
Yeah.
done on that.
I looked at John and I was just like, mate, that was the biggest piece of luck ever. But you know what? And we were just enjoying it because these.
He'll take it.
Yeah, I'm not an
But that's taking the edge off it, because if you're there and you're enjoying it and you're having a good time, those guys are getting all tensed up, their heartbeats through the roof, they're shooting all over the place.
We weren't expecting to win. Like these guys are infantry people. I'm a helicopter pilot. John's an infantry guy, but I'm fucking just like well out of my depth here. And it's a lesson in life. It's like
Don't judge the
if
book.
you enjoy what you do, then you'll do it more. And if you do it more, you'll become better at it. And if you become better at it, you'll monetize it. And that's a lesson in life.
There's a little YouTube clip out there, I think. Is it on YouTube?
Yeah,
Of that program.
We'll link it. We'll link it on this
Challenge.
video. Yeah,
Link
RAF
it to that
version.
because that was
We'll link it
quite
on
a
the video,
fascinating. I mean, I watched that thing and
that was brilliant.
I mean, it was a really up and down. Who was going to win at the end of the day? It was this party, then it was that party, then it was strategy. Who's going to get tired first? Who's going to take the shortcut up the hill, and as opposed to the long route up the hill, and which is of course the preferred route because it's not where you start that counts.
So this is the
and
kicker.
you don't want to tire yourself out in the beginning.
This is the kicker. So we film all of this stuff, and about 3 months later, when they're in the edit, I get a phone call from the producer, executive producer, and she's like, look, in order to make this palatable for TV, we're going to have to edit that it wasn't your first shot that took out both targets. It's going to be your second or third shot. So we're going to edit in that you miss in order to make it like fair.
Yeah.
Give the guys a fighting chance.
And I was like,
Make it more exciting.
Run that by me one more time. They're like, okay, so you're not comfortable with this. I'm like, well, the reality was it was the first shot that took the targets out. They're like, yeah, but this is TV. And that was my moment where I realized that TV people, like whether it's reality or whatever
All
it is,
scripted.
they want to manufacture
It's manipulated for the public. Yeah.
So the moral of the story is don't believe what you see on TV unless you're watching my show on BBC News.
That's
everything.
But Mike,
and then he went. Then I mean, I'm fast forwarding a little bit here now because we've gone to the military thing, which is highly technical. I mean, I find it fascinating because I've got the technical background and the knowledge to follow you. I'm not sure how many people could follow you on that because you gave an incredible amount of detail in a very short period of time. And you started your career in the military and then, went through all these, what they call tours and battles and weapons, knowledge and experience, etc. And then you went in, you got married, you went to New York and so on, and then you got into this filmmaking and you started making films and so on. And right now, because of your background in weapons, assault helicopters, doing all these wars, etc., you've built up this incredible knowledge on warfare, so to speak. You've now ended up in doing actual investigative journalism for wars that are going on at the moment, and you actually have a slot in BBC on a weekly slot. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean that didn't come. That didn't land on my lap when I left the military. I had an agent, and she said to me that you're a middle-aged white man, and it's going to be really hard to get into news. Rightly so because of diversity and everything else, and totally get that. But with 30 years counterterrorism and counterinsurgency behind me, there are very few people around the world that have that knowledge and that experience and the ability to be able to articulate it in a way which is understandable. And to your point, I could talk to you all night about experiences and weapons, and you can't lose the viewer. So I had this sort of ability to be able to dumb it down a little bit and sort of be able to articulate the complexities of warfare. And warfare is supremely complex. You just have to look at
That's what I've gathered now, just talking to you and listening to all the complex and integrated systems, and I mean,
It's not just about systems. It's about rules of. It's about collateral damage.
Yeah.
It's about pattern of life.
yeah,
And so I talk about it as a privileged career because I was involved in the precision guided munitions process, which basically what that means is that we have the technology nowadays to be able to select a weapon, select a fuse, select a platform, and be able to take out something in a built-up area that will minimize collateral. What do I mean by minimizing collateral? It means that you want to take out the target and you don't want to take out any civilians.
Pinpoint accuracy.
But to interject there, I mean, we've covered that theory and the experience and so on. I want to know about what you're doing presently with BBC. What are you doing there? And explain that to us, because you got into that because of your background history. Obviously, your agent got you, some form of contact into this. But because I've watched a couple of the episodes, and I mean, your in-depth knowledge of warfare and weaponry and the way you explain it, I mean, I'm absolutely glued to every single minute of that program. And
I appreciate that, Pete, because your attention span is
it's not good.
It's not. It's not good. I'm lucky if I get you for 15 seconds, and I've been here for a month with you, and 15 seconds for me is a good day. If I've got you for 15 seconds, I'm like, brilliant.
I love your
but that's a
programs.
good lead, because like you getting into the filmmaking and having to articulate certain things through the lens. There's definitely connection there.
Yeah, there has to be. And look, we're all here talking with each other, all right? But at some point, you have to look down the lens and you have to engage the viewer. Because when we speak to each other, when I talk to you, Leon, or when I talk to you, Pete, and I'm explaining something personal or sensitive or complicated, I'll look you in the eye. And as human beings, we look each other in the eye because we want to understand authenticity, we want to understand credibility. And so in this triangle that we have right now, we're having a great conversation. But someone who's watching may not necessarily feel like they're part of the conversation. So when you look into lens, for example, and I start trying to explain to the person who's watching exactly what's going on, it's a very different moment to when I'm talking to you, Pete, or I'm talking to you. And so by engaging someone in the lens, and this is what you learn as a filmmaker, as a host, as a journalist, as a TV presenter, it's all about how you look at someone in the lens and go, this is the situation, it's very serious, this is the facts, these are the facts, I'll impart the information and the knowledge to you, and you make up your own mind.
Okay, but tell us now, what are you doing right now?
So it's called The Security Brief on BBC News. It's a weekly show, and I'll take a deep dive into a lot of the security warfare aspects that are going on around the world at the moment, whether that's Russia, Ukraine, whether that's IDF and Hezbollah, or IDF and Hamas, or Syria. I've had the fortune or the privilege of going into Syria, reporting on the complexities of Syria as it manifested itself from the Arab Spring, the Free Syrian Army, the evolution of Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, Bashar al-Assad's army, the connections between Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. And you don't learn that information overnight. It's a prolonged process of understanding the history of the way things have come about. And so it's not just about the tactics. It's not just about being on the ground in combat zones. It's about, I've got a master's from King's College in war studies. It's about understanding the history of warfare. Clausewitz, for example. Clausewitz is the Bible that was written by a Prussian general in the way that warfare is conducted that still stands true to this day.
It's crazy.
And so it's about marrying the strategy, the politics, the tactical ability, and understanding the geopolitics, and trying to predict. The whole Security Brief show on BBC News is about trying to get ahead of the news cycle. So, for example, when Iran launched over 200 ballistic missiles and drones and cruise missiles on Israel, one of the big questions that was asked was, why hasn't Netanyahu responded straight away? Now, Israel has the benefit of having what's called Iron Dome. An Iron Dome is a 3-tiered defensive system, which starts with Arrow 2 and 3, which are long-range missiles, interceptors that can go out to over 2,500 kilometers, David Sling, which is the intermediary defense system, down to the Tamir missile, which is the in-close short missile that will take out anything that David Sling and Arrow 2 and 3 haven't. So I was asked a question on air by Christian Fraser, who's my co-host on the show, and he runs the Context. He's a brilliant guy. He's reported from the Middle East. He's massively knowledgeable, but also super curious. And he asked me, he said, when do you think Netanyahu will respond? And my response to that was, it's a very... my usual response is it's a really complicated situation, because it usually is. And so I said to him, it's a complicated situation. And he said, what do you mean? Elaborate. And so I said, look, the way that the Iron Dome has had to operate over the last 6 months means that it's used a lot of its missiles, Tamir, David Sling, Arrow 2 and 3, against those incoming attacks. And there is a global logistics resupply system that will put those missiles back into those salvos and so he's not going to respond. Netanyahu's not going to respond until he's fully sure that if Iran decide to launch another attack, he's got enough missiles in those salvos to be able to respond to that. So he doesn't want to provoke anything.
That makes sense, eh?
And then FT, Financial Times, 2 weeks later came out with an article which said Israel is clamoring to get those missiles back into the salvos.
Wow.
So for me, the show was vindicated. The in-depth analysis, which is 30 minutes, was vindicated because that was exactly the point. It was getting ahead of the news cycle and understanding how things are going to pan out. And that's what I'm trying to do at the moment.
Essentially have to predict what's going to happen, yeah?
Through
with what you've got.
Experience, information, knowledge, contacts, sources, and that's what the show's about.
It's a massive network.
Yeah, and a lot of the girls and boys that I was in the military with as a lieutenant colonel are now 2- and 3-star generals, and I have their ear, and they know what they say to me is safe. It's off the record, but at the same time, it's important information to be able to share to people who don't have the knowledge of these sophisticated, strategic and tactical components of warfare, and that's what the security brief is all about.
To present the security brief, you would have to be seriously cognizant of what's confidential and what's not, because obviously the enemies would be watching.
Yeah, 100%.
So that takes years of experience, talent, being able to sift between, take the fly shit out of the pepper type of scenario.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
So, really on that note, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on, Mikey. I mean, I've never been so glued to a conversation. You've given so many facts and figures and technical information. It's been incredible, and it's been an absolute privilege to have you on our podcast. And Leon, you with your weaponry and your shooting experience.
I'm intimidated by Leon's weaponry.
This is going to take another series. I mean, but we'll add it on as we go along.
We'll keep going.
We'll add in all your stuff. But
it's been amazing.
Let us not forget, everybody that comes on this show has to prove their driving skills.
Got to put those flying skills.
Everyone thinks they can drive.
I told you I was,
and they all get this technical. I can drive a car, my bro. But we can all drive our cars in the street. But it's a little bit of an ego thing. So you need to show us how you can drive a car. Now, I've watched you and I've driven with you and I've actually seen how you can drive, and you're actually quite talented. But with that comes experience. And I can say, listen, any aviator that trains on simulators has a distinct advantage because, with years and years of flying experience, you do learn fine-tuning, hand-eye coordination between the feet and, all the little sensors talking to each other, And so if you can apply that to racing and to going balls to the wall around a track. So
hang on. Are we going on a track here, or how are we going to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to put you on a simulator which is almost 100% accurate to the real thing, and we have a reference lap of a professional driver, which is basically the benchmark. However, that's not going to be your target. Your target is to do the best of the ability that you can do, and we will compare your driving skills
This lap.
against all and everybody that comes on this podcast.
Hang on, you fuckers didn't tell me this was going to happen.
Well,
I said I told you I was going to come in here and talk about flying.
We just going to drop you in the deep end.
you have helicopter
Single
skills, which requires helicopter skills requires the most highest level hand-eye coordination. So you should be able to transcribe that, transcend it into a car. Now, I've seen you drive. I mean, I try and keep up with you on a bike, on a car. I've seen you driving next to me, etc. You can drive. But you know what? Driving is a whole different skill. Flying is a whole different skill. But if you put all those things together, and
there are some similarities. There are some.
Absolutely. I mean,
Are you talking about like the whole like Top Gear-y type kind of like? Because I'm happy to be at the bottom of that little list.
Of the list?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Like, if I even make the bottom of the list, I'll be like,
No, you can't tap off the throttle now.
win. I'm like,
no, listen, you are talking unadulterated.
He's playing this way down. He's playing this.
right now. You want to be on the top of the list. I know how competitive you are.
a little bit.
So-
But I also know that my capability is shit.
Don't talk shit.
That's
Talking
not,
shit right
that's
now.
not what that game shows, or what the show said when taking the single shot and killing both of those targets.
I didn't know that was going to happen. That was the whole point.
Yeah, you know, you just got to play that one
So-
down.
Right, so how does this work? So there's a simulator that I have to get on, and
It's a simulator that replicates the real world almost 100%.
Wow.
So all Formula One drivers, all professional drivers around the world, all have a simulator on which they train. And it's the only way that you can really train to sharpen up your driving skills, because to do it in the real life, it's just too expensive. It's just not right.
So you'll get a sighter lap.
Let's take
You can get your sighter lap, and it's a hot lap.
yeah. So I'm
Hang
going
on,
to give you.
that's like Russian. What are you talking about? So how many laps do I get?
So
to
what I'm
practice?
going to give you is 10 practice laps to get your eye in,
All right.
and then give you a hot lap. And that time will be recorded and compared to every guest that comes on this program, okay? So it's a little...
I'm the fucking guinea pig. I'm the guinea pig. That's
You
what I
are the
say.
guinea pig.
It'll be compared to our professional racing driver.
The professional racing driver will not
Some
be
say he
the
stays in
stick.
Cape Town.
All we know is he's the stick.
Yeah. Now, look, I happen to know Ben Collins, who was the Stig on Top Gear. But we're going to do it slightly differently. We're just going to give it a horns. We've got our local South African world. I would say, listen, our best iRacing guy in South Africa is probably ranks in the top 10 in the world. And he happens to build simulators as well. His name is Luke Lucchesi.
Man, I'm in love with that name already.
I mean,
He sounds
I
fast.
want to make love to him.
Italian?
He sounds
I want
fast,
to make love to
doesn't
him.
you know, Italian, of all things. You know, they normally have 11 reverse gears and 1 forward gear. And so here we go. I think, it also depends whether we put you on a driving line or whether we put you cold on the track and you got to figure it out yourself.
Driving line.
Driving
I
line.
like that cold turkey effect though, right?
Yeah,
I need to figure
this
out
is
the lap.
Something that we need to figure out actually, because do we put the guys on a cold turkey track, i.e., you don't have a driving.
I think that levels the playing fields.
Yeah, you don't.
Got to figure it out. It brings that inner instinct out. That inner
You've
racer.
actually got to check where you drive and not just follow a line and brake where it says red
It'll
and
make
so on
everybody
and so
pay
forth.
attention to the sighter laps. So
How about this?
Yeah.
Can I have the line for the first 10 and then the actual hot lap? I get nothing. How about that?
Actually, that's a good idea. It's not a bad suggestion. Let's go.
Andre, the producer over here, is shaking his
He's
head.
saying
rapidly
no,
on the
cold
right.
turkey. He's saying cold turkey.
Well,
Cold turkey.
we
Andre, I
are going
really
to go.
used to like you. I really used to like you.
We're going to go and figure this out right now, and let's go and see how you did,
All right.
and we can
Thanks.
compare it and
Get that
post.
hot lap in.
Thanks. I'm going to show
Thanks
you my
very
complete
much.
incompetence of how not to do this. That's my contribution.
Thanks,
You're
guys.
welcome. $152.
Look at that.
Best one yet.
Very good. That's your best exit there so far. So he's done one lap. You're on your second lap. Tires are getting warm, so there we go. There we go. You're still on a good time, so don't worry about it. Never give up, as they say. Never give up.
give up.
Third gear.
Third.
Yeah. What happens is the car either locks up a little bit and you could lose the rear, and also when you put your foot down, it spins, although you don't realize it, but you're spinning and you don't want to spin at all. Third gear, yeah, there we go.
I can still see the twig.
Yeah,
Got him in my sights.
yeah,
Last big turn. Third gear.
yep.
Yes. Warm tires. Hallelujah.
Uh-huh. Well, we're back, and our assault helicopter pilot is back, and he's out of the simulator, and we're now going to talk about his drive. And, having some aviation background, especially helicopter, actually, I thought I had good feeling, but
You do have good feeling.
I feel it. I feel it in my fingertips. Well, this man has been operating helicopters at the highest level, in war territories, anti-terrorism incursions, missions, etc. But, these years and years of helicopter flying, did you feel, well, I drove the other day with you on a motorbike, and I was very impressed with your feeling and the handling there, how you handled the bike. And then I saw you on the simulator, and I thought, no, this, to any normal person out there,
He's got to be properly shit.
you would have said, this guy's driven a race car before. He's driven a car before. You had incredible feeling, in my opinion. And, to get anywhere near our Twig's time,
The twig.
I sort of said I thought you'd get between 10 and 15 seconds. 15 seconds kind of like was my mark, but between 10 and 15 seconds.
Of the twig. What was the twig's time?
The Twig did a 1 minute 44.5.
Whoosh.
So I would like to know how you did. How did you feel with that car? How did you feel with the feeling of the car? How was the experience?
Well, you know me, P. I've struggled with my feelings for a long time. So
there's no your feelings here.
So, mate, you hurt my feelings all the time. So I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, flying a helicopter, you literally can move the cyclic stick, you know, less than a centimeter, and it will start moving the helicopter left or right, or the collective up or down. And so you have to be incredibly sensitive when flying. You can't be cultural when flying assault helicopters. So I guess there's a little bit of translation from that aspect that I was potentially looking to be able to harness, as you say, the feeling through the steering wheel. But this simulator is just, you know, I played on game or PlayStation, all that. But this simulator is just off the charts. I mean, it's literally like being in a car.
Exactly like the real thing, isn't it?
Get all the vibration back on the stick. You've got the noise.
It's just incredible.
It is off the charts, incredible. So I think, you know, the first 5 laps, I mean, all I'll say is thank God you've got the line on there.
Yeah, look, we gave you 1 tank of fuel to get your eye in, which is about 8 to 10 laps to practice to get your lines in. You know, we got to give everybody the same advantage. So I saw you, you know, spinning a lot, going off track. But what I did notice that every lap you were getting it more and more and more together.
For sure. I think, you know, one of the key things for me was understanding what was the gear that you needed to be in when you hit a corner. And I think knowing what gear you're in, whether it's second or third or a first, if it's a chicane, if you can program that in your head and anticipate that gear, and get the speed down for that gear, then, you know, you're setting yourself up going into the corner, which means that you're going to be able to kill it coming out of the corner.
Yeah.
So I thought that was massively helpful. The fact that you've got the different colorations on the sim, so, you know, green is accelerator full down, white is off the accelerator, red is hitting the brake, you know, that all really helps. And it's just, again, it's like flying. It's all about anticipation. It's all about lining up, you know, the flight path or the curve in this case on the apex, and setting yourself up coming out, gunning out from the corner. So I was trying to make that work. On this particular track, the chicane is the hardest bit to navigate. You really have to get the speed down into first, because you overcook that even by 10, 15 kilometers, then you're into the gravel. Yeah. So I think that took a little bit of, look, I could go on. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I didn't want to get off it, and I could do another 100 laps on it, and I can see why you're never out of that sim. But 143.5, that was the
Where
twig.
Where did you get that time? Was 144.5.
144.5 was the twig. And then your previous guest on the previous episode, Jonathan, what did he do?
Yeah, so we had Jonathan Thomas on, who's the fastest human being around Kyalami track at the moment. He broke the track record now with the last South African Endurance Series 9-hour event.
Not intimidated at all by that?
He's becoming a world-renowned race driver. He's doing exceptionally well in the international market. So what I'm really trying to say is this is
I'm fucked.
A serious driver. And we had him on, and he did a 1 minute 45.5. He was 1 second off the twig. And that is actually a remarkable time. But bearing in mind, he is the quickest guy in the country. One of the absolute fastest drivers in the country. Phenomenal driver. Multiple go-kart champion, international guy. So
look, if you'd have put a tequila soda at the finish line, I think I probably would have been the quickest guy in the country.
You would have picked up a pace or two. Hey,
all right. So what do I think?
So what do you think you did?
Well, look, I think if I can get within 10 seconds of the twig, then I think I can hold my head high and walk out of here and be able to walk into a bar and not be ashamed.
I agree with you. I agree. If you can get within 10 seconds, you would have done exceptionally well. Your time is a 1 minute 51.5. So that is
Six-
6 seconds.
7.
44,
45,
5, 6,
yeah.
7, 8, 9, 10.
Let's get the fingers out. Let's get the fingers. And
You
then
know,
we've got a calculator.
Now you're going to do minutes in that. Yeah, that's 6 seconds. So that is an amazing, amazing time. I didn't think you'd get under 10 seconds within that guy. So absolutely well done.
Thank you.
And
That places me. What does that places me last, doesn't it?
Yeah, last of
brilliant
the
time.
3 that have been on now. You know, I don't know where the hell this street guy comes out of. I mean, we get him off the street walking around in the spa.
Right.
And drag him in here. He doesn't want to say a damn word. Gets on the simulator and smashes a 144.5 and ducks. I mean, we tried to get something out of him, if you remember.
Do you know what I think? I think I'm going to play with Barbie more. I think that might be I think that might be a secret sauce.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'll take it. I think that's you know, I mean, it's early days. I'm last.
Yeah.
But hopefully I won't end up last at the end of the season.
We're going to get a couple of more race drivers coming up, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. We've got some really, really good names coming in, and we'll see how I do. And, you know, Andre is also a formidable simulator driver, but,
Andre's
you
keeping
know, I
very
haven't
quiet.
put him on there. Us guys, I'm going to try this thing one of these days as well, and see how we do. But that's absolutely a well-done time. And if you got anything, Andre, that you'd like to ask this young man,
No,
that actually,
just thank you for being here with us. And it's
Yeah.
been absolutely amazing listening to you talk, your stories. I mean, I was glued to the edge of my seat the whole way. And it's an area of life that I can't say I've got any experience with. So it really was fascinating. Thank you.
yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure, and you know, good luck with the podcast. I realise it's
And good luck with
early
your
days.
BBC. We all watch. We logged on every week to see what's going on in the war and the weaponry and all that sort of stuff around the world. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.
Thanks. Cheers. Thanks very much.